welcome everybody to another edition of Hot Program. I am your host with the most, all the way from the East Coast, and as always, good people, I am in airplane mode. And I am joined by a man who frequently sends me an introduction, but needs no introduction. Although I will tell you, he is not my only black friend. How you doing today, my one? Every time I say her name and people don't know, I have to be like, oh, that's his name. It's not actually my one black friend. I promise I have at least two black friends.
Excellent. I'm glad for that. And
two
I
or
hope
more.
I hope everyone enjoys the same convenience of having more than one black friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's jump into this because I think this is an interesting video. I sort of sometimes get sometimes I feel like atheist argumentation is a bit too focused on sort of like the social dynamics or the psychologizing. So when we talk about like what's effective, we talk about the argumentation rather than the substance of what we're saying. Where that leads with this is this barely bearable atheist who I like. You know, they're going to start this off by talking about why they think there's a better approach than to saying there's no evidence of God.
Interesting. Okay.
And so I'm kind of taking it with a grain of salt because there's no evidence, and I actually think we need to stick to the there's no evidence. I think there's no evidence is one of the best arguments we have. And so I think as he gets into it, maybe we'll discuss that a little bit. But then he's going to take it to this other place where he's going to talk about what he thinks is a better approach. And that's to sort of lay out what he calls the myth hypothesis. And the reason I like that is because that's what I've been arguing for a long time is the case for strong atheists. It's like a different way of wording. So what I always say is I'm a strong atheist. For those who don't know what that means being an atheist just means I don't accept currently a God claim. Like you can think of it, I'm currently missing an active belief in God. And so a lot of people consider themselves to be agnostic atheists, which is sort of a sidestep because Gnosticism is about knowledge, atheism is about belief. Claiming I lack a belief is not a knowledge claim. And so technically I'm an agnostic atheist because I recognize that when it comes to knowledge, I don't know there's no God. But if you were to talk to me, we also make a distinction between soft atheism and hard atheism. And soft atheism is basically I lack a God belief, but hard atheism is a sort of an affirming I believe there is no God. And I'm a hard atheist, a firm atheist, that there is no God. And my basis for that claim is gods are the product of human imaginations. That's what the evidence suggests. So while I can't say I've scoured the entire universe and every alternative dimension to prove that there's no God hiding under a rock somewhere, I think the evidence clearly suggests that gods are the product of human imagination. And anything that's the product of a human imagination, we say doesn't exist. So he kind of comes at that same point, but a different way by saying, let's look at it as a hypothesis that this is a myth and then see if what we see in the world looks more like what the believers claim or more like what we would expect if this is a myth. So it's interesting to me because I think I would do both. I would do there's no evidence, and I would probably articulate there's no evidence slightly different than he articulates it. And then I would also go to now let's consider this as an alternative hypothesis, which is that this is all a myth, and then let's see if that also holds up. And I think those things go well together. But anyway, that's the setup. And
Interesting, interesting.
yeah, let's go ahead and jump
Well,
into
I
it.
I
Oh,
just
go
want to
ahead. Yeah,
say
yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
I've hinted at this on Hot Program in recent episodes. I'm considering changing my tact about having this discussion. Uh, Number one, if I ask them what would change your mind and they say nothing, I would say, then stop talking to me about this. If nothing will change your mind, either you're telling me you don't care that it's not true, or you are so afraid of me convincing you that it is not true that you are literally blocking reason from entering your brain. Let's talk about something else. You can tell me how to grow lettuce. I've never done it. But let's not have a discussion about religion, any person's particular religion, if they don't want to hear my rebuttals, if they don't want to hear my challenges. Um, One of my childhood friends, like I've known him since kindergarten. We literally were in kindergarten together, K through 12. I admire this guy so much, and I thought, man, this is one of the smartest people I know. Evidently, something happened. I kept learning, and he seemed to. It's like Mercury, right? It's just that Earth has a different orbit, which makes it seem like Mercury is moving backwards. It's not moving backwards. We're just going past it. So I think at some point, John was in retrograde, and he just can't put forth an argument. And I am happy to share with the Hot Program audience. I asked him one time, can you prove what you say is true, that there is a God? And I was so mortified slash happy to see his reply. I can. I wrote, what was it? What do you have? He wrote, look at the trees. And I was like, yeah.
All right. So
It's the
real quick.
worst argument.
So X left this comment, are you agnostic about Santa? I think this is 100% the case, X. I always say, so just to be clear about the word games people play, with the whole agnostic thing, I don't because I did say at the beginning I would consider myself an agnostic atheist. That's only when pinned to it because people want to play word games. I don't really call myself an agnostic much. I call myself an atheist straight up. And matter of fact, I'll call myself a hard atheist a million times before I call myself an agnostic. Because again, I do believe I know there's no God. Now, where the agnostic gets me is I can't prove it empirically the same way I can evolution, right? But where I get to the hard atheism is, again, I think all the evidence suggests that it's the product of a human imagination. And I also believe, as an evolutionary biologist, we know for a fact that we evolved. So that means we know for a fact we were not created. So the any sort of creator hypothesis is something I'm not gonna be able to get down with as a scientist. But I do find it very frustrating that we play these word games, and I think we only play these word games because that's all Christians and believers have. And so atheists have been sucked into these same word games. At the end of the day,
Yeah.
dog, the bottom line is simple. There's no good reason to believe your faith claim. Can you provide us a good reason to believe your faith claim? Oh, no, you can't. Great. There's still no good reason to believe your faith claim. You know, this thing about it almost feels like bullying atheists. It feels like bullying atheists into admitting that they don't, that they can't prove there's no God, rather than the believer accepting the burden of proof and actually demonstrating one. So But back to what my one black friend was saying, I wanted to say
Okay,
I
I
I
want to
would
address the Santa thing too, but
I
go
would
ahead.
take it even further than you do, and I would say it's just coercive control. At this point, to me, religion is all about coercive control. It's about coercive control that keeps people in the religion, and it's about the coercive control of the believer towards everyone in their life to basically bully people into not challenging their faith. It's why I don't have a lot of sympathy for the nice believers. But the thing that you said that made it so interesting to me is I think actually confronting them, which I think we should all do, and nail them down to it. And if they want to squirm like little children, then let them squirm and let everybody watch them squirm. But they regress. They regress, and that is a result of the coercive control that they're participating in. So I read a bunch of text on the last stream I did. They were somebody tried to set me up with one of their nieces or whatever, and I met her at an event, and I really wasn't interested, but I exchanged contact information because the person trying to set us up was right there, so I was just trying to be polite and
Hmm.
sort of communicate about politely. And the way I tried to exit the situation was basically like, hey, it was really nice to meet you. I love the person that tried to set us up. I don't think they know this, but I'm an atheist. I'm not a Christian. So it's nice meeting you, but I don't think you're type. I'm your type, right? Because I knew this person was a Christian, and that's why they were trying to set me up with. Because they thought I needed like a good Christian woman, right? And I'm like, no,
Well,
that's the.
the husband is justified by the wife through her faith. Go on.
So I was, so I was trying to do that, and then she asked me like, "Oh, why are you an atheist? Why do you feel so strongly about Christianity, right?" And so I laid it all out. I
Mm.
laid out the lack of evidence and how as an evolutionary biologist there's no reason to believe we were created and there's no good arguments. And then with regard to Christianity, I laid into the character of God, the commands for genocide and slavery and rape and all that stuff, and
Mm.
laid out why black people shouldn't be Christians because it was forced on our enslaved ancestors and it justifies slavery. Like there's and rather than just dealing with that, instead I got, oh no, I've actually read every word of the Bible multiple times. And yeah, there are things that are challenging about the character of God, but it just makes me believe more. And yeah, being a Christian isn't all halos and rainbows. And there are really difficult passages, but it just makes me believe even more. Regression. You again, when I met you, you were a decent person who somebody I have really, really high regard for thought we should actually meet and pursue each other fucking romantically. So you started as a decent person who can sing, and I was like, it was nice to meet you. And I'm trying to excuse you. I'm trying to say, hey, you seem like a really decent person, but I'm an atheist. I'm probably not your type. Let me just dip out over here. You can go find you a good Christian man. You seem like a really nice person. You've gone from that to, yeah, I know the book contains genocide and rape and slavery and that this is only something I believe because my ancestors were enslaved. But it just makes me believe it even more. You've regressed. You've regressed. You started at decent human being. You are now at literally someone I will never speak to again, as long as I am converting oxygen to carbon dioxide. And I
Uh,
promise people this is the realities of Christianity. They all get to live in that nice, friendly, oh, I'm so nice. Oh, don't blame me. I'm just a Christian. I'm just here to help the poor and love my neighbor and love God and love Jesus. And I'm faithful. I never steal. I'm just such a good person. Don't mind me. I'm just a Christian. And then as soon as we really challenge them on the stuff that a really decent person shouldn't be going along with, things that a really good person should be able to read, understand what they're reading, and be like, yeah, I'm out. I want no parts of that. That's not ever what we get. What we get instead is the doubling down, the tripling down, the oh, and so I think that's why so many of us don't go there with them because that's exactly the side we don't want to see.
I have a people on Hot Program, or regular viewers and listeners would have heard me talk about my 2008 Prius. I say frequently this is the finest automobile built by human hands. This particular example, my 2008 Prius. When I bought it, I think I paid $3,000 salvage title. The thing had been partially rebuilt. It was old. The interior was kind of starting to show its age. Had 117,000 miles on it. It now has close to 300,000 miles on it after 9 years. I have seen this thing give me 50 plus, even 60 plus MPG, while using it. It has rarely ever needed anything. I replaced the brakes once. There's stuff I've never had to replace on it. I replaced the battery in it, not the hybrid battery, but the regular 12-volt battery twice. Um, it's just an amazing car. And I have a friend out in California that I told him when I leave California, I'll give you this car because he's kind of always down on his luck. And when I actually was moving, I regretted that I told him he could have it because even though I got a pretty sweet station wagon here and I got other vehicles or whatever, I know how good that car is and I know how reliable it is. And I didn't really want to give it up, but I did want to help my friend. It may be that in the minds of believers, their belief, not the actual God, their belief has carried them so many miles. Their belief has been reliable. There is no tangible God that accompanies that belief, but the belief is still there. My Prius got hit by someone who just drove away and didn't tell me, got backed into, I suppose. Well, their faith may have been backed into by a hit and run driver, but they're still going down the road. They may have to change this or that about what they believed, but they're still going down the road with that belief mostly intact. And even though the belief may have faded some over the years, right? The paint, the clear coat is peeling on the roof of my Prius. It smells like burritos and farts on the inside. But if you need to get through somewhere, you need to go somewhere, that Prius will take you. And their belief is just like my Prius, except my Prius and my interactions with my Prius is are based on something real. They're tangible. I can take you with me and not metaphorically. You can get in beside me, you and two other people. And in the back, if they're as thin as you, Jay, you can fit three back there, right? So there is a big difference because I can show you that car. I can demonstrate it. In fact, if you're in the United States, continental United States, Canada, or Mexico, I can drive to you. I can bring it to you. You don't have to come to me. I can drive to wherever you are and you can see it. This is what I was
I
talking
think
about.
no, I think this is a great analogy.
Mhm.
I would, and we got it in this video, but I would say,
Sure.
no, it's a fantastic analogy, and I do think that that's how most people see it. The problem is the rest of us have to really get in there and make them understand. Just because your belief has gotten you this far doesn't mean your belief is true.
That's right.
And also that is what's robbing you of your strength, right? Because you're not understanding that it's really you that's gotten you this far. And then the other thing is we have to start seeing poor people and all of these marginalized people and think they're so poor. Let me leave their faith alone because they're nice and they're just struggling to get by. You have to feel for them people and recognize that poor people can't afford false hope. Um, so that's the challenge. The challenge is to take people who have clung to this and help them realize that it isn't really serving them. But I do think that that's what's happening, and that was a very compassionate way to put it. All right, let's go ahead and jump into this. I've skipped to like 5 minutes in just to help us with time. So where he's getting to the no evidence thing.
Back to Dr. Craig's observation that the atheists main complaint is that there ain't any evidence for God's existence. And let
Oh,
me
by the way, he's reviewing William Lane Craig's latest book, On Guard.
just say right up
That's why
front here
Dr. Craig's on the
that I
thumbnail.
agree with Dr. Craig that this is a bad argument. In fact, it might be the very worst argument skeptics could make. And here's why. If we say that they ain't no evidence for God, that gives the apologists an opening or two that they can use to their advantage. On the one hand, they can claim that this just shows that atheists is ignorant. Believers has all kinds of stuff that they take as evidence, if not proof, of God's existence. So if we say there ain't no evidence, the apologists can just claim to know something that we don't. And that makes the apologist sound like the expert, at least to some folks. And on the other hand, if an apologist wants to be a little bit more aggressive, they can claim that, in fact, there is evidence and we know it. We's just suppressing the truth in unrighteousness, like it says in Romans 1:18 and 5.
Now, this is the type of conversation. This is where this starts to get so frustrating to me, and again, it just becomes word games. And then this is where I get critical of atheists because you have to stop playing their word games for them. Stop playing their word games for them. So this is one of them conversations where it's like I have to literally treat this like I'm talking to a child because when it comes to religion, we are talking to children, I guess. So let's just be aware of what the freaking definitions of evidence are, right? The definition of evidence is a body of facts or information indicating whether a belief or proposition is true or valid. So what gets annoying is, yes, technically you can count anything as evidence, but that's not what we mean. Typically, what we're talking about is empirical evidence, or we're talking about scientific evidence. So hang on. I actually had a conversation with ChatGPT about this. Actually, I kind of just remembered. Here, I'll pull it up and share it. I said, distinguish evidence, empirical evidence, and scientific evidence in the context of religion. When I say there is no evidence of God, what am I really saying? And ChatGPT said it pretty good. He said, what is evidence? The broadest category. Evidence just means any reason someone presents to support a claim. It does not have to be reliable, testable, or rational. Examples that count as quote unquote evidence in the broad sense: I had a feeling, my pastor said so, this old book claims it happened, I dreamed about it, millions of people believe it, I survived the car accident, that's proof God protected me. These are reasons people use, but they tell us nothing about whether the claim is actually true. Right, which again, go back here to this definition, the available body of facts or information indicating whether a belief or proposition is true or valid. Meaning if you're using something like this, and it literally is a reason, but tells us nothing about whether the claim is actually true or valid, I don't have to count it as fucking evidence. You might use the word evidence, but it's not actually doing what evidence is supposed to do. So in the context of religion, almost all quote unquote evidence presented is just this broad subjective category. What is empirical evidence? Narrower and testable. Empirical evidence is information you can observe, measure, detect, or test in the real world. Empirical evidence is sensory or instrument based, is available to everyone, can be confirmed or disconfirmed, can be repeated, or does not depend on personal belief. Examples are DNA, fossils, measurements, experiments, photographs, recorded audio, video, brain scans, statistical patterns. Religious claims almost never produce empirical evidence. What is scientific evidence? Strongest category. Scientific evidence is empirical, testable, collected systematically, subject to peer review, replication, and falsification, embedded in a predictive framework, consistent with all known data. Religion has zero scientific evidence. Not little, not weak, zero. This isn't an opinion, it's definitional. A claim is scientific only if it can be tested, measured, and potentially proven. God claims are untestable, make no predictions, have no measurable mechanism, and can always be patched with quote unquote mysterious ways. Thus, they cannot generate scientific evidence. So when you say there's no evidence of God, what are you really saying? Depends on which meaning of quote unquote evidence you intend. There are three possible interpretations. Meaning number one, there is no scientific evidence for God. This is completely correct and uncontroversial. Even honest theologians will agree. You're saying the God hypothesis has never passed the scientific test, predicts nothing, explains nothing, and is indistinguishable from no God at all. This is the strongest and most defensible meaning. And remember this, we're going to come back to this, right? Because the God hypothesis has never passed the scientific test, predicts nothing, explains nothing, and is indistinguishable from no God at all. We'll come back to that with the myth hypothesis. Meaning number two, there's no empirical evidence for God, also completely correct. You're saying there is nothing observable, measurable, or detectable in the world that points uniquely to a supernatural creator, not miracles, not prayers, not scripture, not personal experience, not fine-tuning, not moral intuitions, all have natural explanations. Meaning three, there is no good evidence for God. This is where religious people claim you're wrong because they think testimonies, ancient texts, personal feelings, answered prayers count as evidence. And the broad, irreducible definition, those do count as quote unquote evidence, just bad evidence. So the more accurate statement is there is no reliable, empirical, or scientific evidence for God, only subjective personal claims that cannot be tested. Wow. All right. So why did I drag you through all of that? Was it just to waste your time? No. It's to think critically about one, the content we consume and how these arguments get made even on our side. I love the Barely Bearable Atheists. We're doing their video because as soon as they drop a video, I watch it, and sometimes it's so good. I'm like, we should stream about this. So this isn't to like call them a fuckface and throw them under the bus, but atheists do better. Like do better. There is no evidence for God. And if you can't articulate what we mean when we say there's no evidence for God, you maybe shouldn't be doing this. Because it's a pretty clear case to say, and evidence is that which actually indicates whether or not something is valid or true. So there's no evidence for you because everything you can point to me as evidence, I'm going to have to tell you is number one, bad evidence. And number two, doesn't actually indicate that your God is true or real. So I'm perfectly fine throwing it out. And that's what we can just say to them. I mean to say there's no good evidence. There's no empirical evidence. And there certainly isn't any scientific evidence. And
So
I'm just to finish. I just don't like the
yeah.
fact that this is to me an atheist putting other atheists in an armbar, telling them, "Hey, don't tell them there's no evidence, because then you're going to look weak and you're going to lose the debate." I wish I would lose the motherfucking debate telling a Christian there's no evidence for their bullshit. All right, go ahead, my one black friend.
Okay. I'll keep my car analogy going. Maybe I should do something independent of this broadcast and really just connect the two, right? So in my Prius, the radio has presets. So when I bought the car, it had been somebody else's car for years before it became mine. There are radio station presets that existed. You push a button on that radio, and it's going to take me to a station. Sometimes it would take to static because maybe where this car had been, there was a radio station, like I'm going to say 98.6. But in my area, there's no 98.6 to receive a strong enough signal from. So it's just static. When we offer an objection, the hard ER believer is probably pushing a radio preset to get a response that they know is there, right? It's in keeping with their faith. I, the non-believer and who has read the Bible multiple times, right? I probably know it better than they do. I'm suppressing the truth and unrighteousness to them. That response was already one of the presets that has gone into their belief, right? Or pre-existed their belief because it's in the biblical text. That when you see people like me, that's what we're doing. We're suppressing the truth and unrighteousness. And yet, if we made a list of sins that I am currently involved in, or they are currently involved in, there is maybe significantly longer than my own. if I have some to list, right?
Like I said, projection is literally the confession of negative self-awareness. For a religious believer to tell me I'm suppressing the truth in unrighteousness while they are literally believing a fucking fairy tale, while that allows them to worship a god that murdered the entire planet by drowning and promised to do it again by fire. I wish a believer would tell me I'm suppressing the truth and unright. Let me get back. Let's jump into this video because I want to hear what you say about his case that he's gonna make.
Following. And I know you've heard apologists quote that one. They love Romans 1 because believers eat it up. Believers love to hear how non-Christians is sinners, because that makes Christians look good without them having to brag about it, so they can be better than us and still be humble. Win-win. Now, I know why we make this argument. We ain't trying to set ourselves up to be generous to apologists and hand them golden opportunities like that. We're just trying to put the burden of proof where it belongs, on the folks making the extraordinary claims. Skeptics has been doing this for thousands of years, which means that apologists has had thousands of years of practice in how to get around it and turn it to their advantage. So I say it's time we changed our strategy and hand them an argument they ain't so prepared to handle. When I talk about the evidence for God, I don't say they ain't no evidence, 'cause that'd be trying to prove a negative, and that ain't impossible, but we'd be starting at a disadvantage. What I say is that actually there's tons of evidence that is directly relevant to the question of whether God exists. The reason I think he don't exist is because literally 100% of that evidence is more consistent with the conclusion that God's a myth than with the conclusion that he's real. And maybe you can see right away how that's a whole lot stronger argument to make. But if not, let me give you some examples. Let's compare the two conclusions and ask
All right,
what
remember this is
real-world
our. All right,
observation
hang on.
we'd
This is
expect
right
to
where he articulated it.
make
Let's
if
hear it again. This is our argument,
maybe you
gang.
can see right away how 100% of that evidence is more consistent with the conclusion that God's a myth than with the conclusion that he's real. And
So
maybe
that's the idea, is that from now on we propose God's a myth as opposed to being real, and then let's look and see what the evidence suggests, right? So that's kind of where I was getting at before, is my thing is gods are the products of human imagination. That's basically what he's laying out. And then rather going to what I would go to, which is I would go to the text. I would basically go to the text and say, the text seem to suggest gods are the product of human imagination because we only find them in the text. We find them either in the text or the movies or the poems or the books or the films, but we don't find them out in the real world. He would say, don't go to the books, go to the real world, and now let's see if the real world looks like gods exist or if gods are fictional.
you can see
Well,
right away
Oh,
how
go ahead,
hold on a
Terry.
second. I have, as many of you in you pocket locker certainly know, I'm a Christ mythicist. I don't think Jesus existed at all. I think the best case for Jesus existing is something Christopher Hitchens pointed out that's in the biblical text. There are multiple birth dates for him. So it's as if somebody's trying to make the story fit. Now, I have an easy answer to that. The Gospels that we read, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, very much to me read like sort of a high school assignment where people were given a list of story points that they had to include in the story that they wrote. And that's
Yes.
it just
Yeah.
I was given that assignment based on something one of my teachers had written when he was a kid. He gave the assignment to the whole class. And so we wrote stories based on his original work. So we were allowed to include things he created in our stories, but we were told you must not simply replicate, but tell a consistent story with what I've already started here and use as much of it as you need to do that.
So
It's literally like that assignment that we had. And go ahead, Pocket Locker.
no, I was just saying that's a really great assignment. And for me,
Yes.
I also have always just been able to say it's very possible that there was a legend passed down, and the legend that was passed down included a particular birth narrative. Um, Not necessarily because it was true, but because that was just part of the narrative. And then to your point, if this other author now needs him to have a different backstory to serve a theological point, that's easily how you get two different birth narratives without there being a real person. There was the original myth, somebody needed the remix, or you can simply just have competing theological narratives, right? I have a theological reason to say he was born this poor nobody in Nazareth. I've got this other narrative, and now we need him to be born in Bethlehem as the descendant of David or whatever the fuck, right? And so I just have two different theological camps
Yeah.
who want to create a narrative, so
So
I'm with you. But yeah, go ahead.
okay, I have to say this. I've mentioned this on Hot Program before. Forgive me if you've been a listener for us for years and you remember me saying this. I can't recall if it was Herodotus or Diodorus Siculus who wrote about a play that someone put on where in the play there was a character who was an epiphany of Osiris on Earth, and the audiences thought this really took place. What they were seeing in this play was so well written that people believed it was true. Think of that. They believed it was true. It is without question a story that someone made up, and yet it was so compelling, and credit to the actors, portrayed in such a compelling way that the audience or audiences thought it was real.
But see, now I'm about to make you a
Now, where,
historicist.
well, hold on. Where are we today? People believe, I believe the entire Bible. So the part where Moses is watching a battle occur beneath him, and as long as his arms were held up, the Israel or the Hebrews were winning. The moment he got tired and his arms lowered, they started losing the battle. So his brother and his sister prop his arms up so that they can go on and continue to be victorious. Are you effing serious? Are you serious?
Yeah,
A
glad
donkey talked. Are you serious? A snake talked. Are you serious?
glad he wasn't at the Battle of Leningrad or whatever, one of them 200-day sieges from World War II. That'd have been a real trying time. I'm about to make you a
They would have
historicist
built an
though.
apparatus. They would have built an apparatus where he could have slept like this or something.
Gang,
I'm
we're
sure they would have figured it out. They would have got
gang,
Noah in there to engineer him something.
we are officially historicists now because we want to proclaim that Jesus is the most famous failed prophet ever. And I can't say he's the pathetic, the biggest failure. He's the most famous failed prophet in the history. Like that's
Well,
the
think of what you're saying. People consider him correct. They consider him right. Right now, we have an interesting confluence of events. We have the comet that people think is a spaceship. People say that's part of the end times prophecy that is going to be revealed here on Earth. People say it's part of Project Bluebeam. Many people consider Trump the Antichrist in the way that we're seeing Israel try to control a bunch of things, or that there are wars going on over there. There's wars and rumors of wars, right? There's the what is it, the Euphrates River drying up. There's all these people who are getting excited, taking bits and pieces of the biblical text, even from Revelation and other books, and saying this is the time. I was critical, and I'm pretty sure I did it on Hot Program, of Joe Biden, because I thought this is something he believed to some degree, like these were the end times, and he was trying to do things that would bring Jesus back, as if, and I tweeted him like, "You're not bringing Jesus back with what you're doing. You're not."
I
But there are people
wouldn't put it
who, in
past
my
him.
opinion, control control actual world events. It's not simply me and you. We have opinions, but they're controlling world events. They can send an army someplace. They have the influence to make, or over leaders of countries, right, to make certain things occur. some of those people believe what we read in Revelation to be true.
Yeah,
And they are in such a hurry that they want to see Jesus return, as if they could make it happen. They're preparing the way for the Lord. They're making the crooked ways straight so that Jesus can come back down here and rapture out, get rid of all the non-believers and leave the believers behind, so a new heaven and new earth can be made, and a new Jerusalem can descend from the sky, and everything will all be delightful
well, look,
from there on
let's get
out.
back into our
Yeah.
tape. So, but
Okay.
I will say just yeah, I don't know why some of us are pretending that it's okay for people to believe these things and why we keep going along with it. I think that sounds like the type of cult we should be committed to ending.
That's a whole lot stronger argument to make. But if not, let me give you some examples. Let's compare the two conclusions and ask what real-world observation we'd expect to make if in the one was true versus if in the other was true. Suppose that God is just a myth. What would be the most natural consequence that would result from him being fictional? Well, obviously, the biggest consequence would be the fact that we wouldn't never see him showing up in real life. Being a fictional character, he can only show up in stories that folks tell about him supposedly showing up in real
There you
life.
go.
So the fact that he don't show up in real life is consistent with the myth hypothesis. Now, can apologists come up with post hoc rationalizations for
Hey,
why he don't
Shimami.
show up? Sure. You can come up with post hoc rationalizations for just about anything. But the thing is, the myth hypothesis don't require us to add any post hoc rationalizations. It's already consistent right from the get-go. And that means the myth hypothesis is more consistent with reality than the gospel hypothesis. Or let's take apologetics itself. If in the gospel hypothesis was true, we'd naturally expect that God wouldn't need no apologists. The gospel says he loves us and wants to be with us forever, and that Jesus died and rose again to take care of the sin problem so's we could be together forever. So, okay, forever started a long time ago, and God already done took care of the sin problem. So he ought to be showing up in real life just like the Bible says he wants to do and is able to do. And if he was doing that, we wouldn't need no apologists. We'd all see for ourselves firsthand that he was real. And
And of course, it's super inconsistent with all the times allegedly he showed up in the Bible and the whole Jesus thing. The whole Jesus thing is supposed to be how important it was for him to show up in flesh and blood and live as a person. So again, I'm really convicted that we're in a different phase, and what we're experiencing is cultural lag. What do I mean by that? We're in the phase where many of us just know this is bullshit. And the cultural lag is people who think we should still be entertaining this conversation. I'm literally to the point where I will say, and I'll say this sincerely and I'll hang my hat on it. I think we should be teaching every child in our schools, starting at literally kindergarten, that gods are not real. That right in there with the fairy tales. We should just be teaching them. We should be teaching them religions as cultural myths, in the same way you love Barney the dinosaur and Sesame Street, and you're gonna learn about Jack and Jill that ran up the hill, the fetch a pail of water. Jack fell down and broke his crown. All that. Jill came tumbling after. Yeah, and Yahweh's gonna come tumbling, and Allah gonna come tumbling, and Ganesh gonna come tumbling. They all gonna go tumbling down that same hill because they're all fairy tales. And imagine how great the world would be if children knew that. Do you know why I think I'm not even kidding at all? Why I really do think we should be doing this? Because people are trying to indoctrinate children. And part of what
uh,
y'all are not taking seriously as a society is what this shit does to children. And the fact that we can't trust parents because the parents are the ones trying to indoctrinate them. And I get them in college. And it's too late in college because they're already baked in and they're emotionally attached and defensive. They needed to be taught as little ones how to resist these people.
my my opinion is that if religion were to be taught in school, it would mean the end of religion within 2 generations. It would just be over, and I think teachers would discover probably after, the first 6 years, that kids were laughing when they tell them these stories about, Jesus or
Oh yeah.
Ganesh or
Oh yeah.
whoever. They'd be laughing. And I challenged someone on the internet when I was like, "Oh, why is this a joke to some people, or why isn't this a joke to some people?" I was being joking when I said X, Y, Z, and I know this is the same guy from I referred to earlier who used to read books all the time and was so studious. And I admired him, thought he was so smart, and he's in retrograde. Um, he 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 got a challenge from me. So the talking snake is a joke. The guy walking on water is a joke. The guy walking around feeding people with, he just had a few loaves of bread and a few fish and he fed thousands of people. That's a joke. A guy taking a bunch of foreskins and bringing them to the king so he could marry his daughter. That's a joke. Like all these things are in your holy book on their face to a modern person who has never been exposed to them. They are laughable.
Mm. Yep.
But for him, what are they? What are they? Maybe not the foreskins, but the rest of it is a dearly held belief. He may the foreskin bit may have no value for him as something that is a touchstone for his faith. It may have no value, but the rest does. And I'll hit him with Mark 16:16 through 18. Bro, you don't have magical powers to lay your hands on people and heal them. I think it would be fantastic if you did. Wouldn't that
Yeah.
be lovely? Wouldn't you be such a gift to the human race if you had that power? The good you could do, the good that Christians could do with that alone is
Just tell
almost
me.
unimaginable.
Just tell him he's in a cult. You know.
I would I don't think that's as effective as saying this doesn't work. It isn't what you think it is. It
Right.
doesn't work.
Right.
Like right, we can go back to my Prius. Hey, let's get in my car and drive to a children's hospital. And then you use your Mark 16 through chapter 16, 16 through 18 powers to heal these kids.
Yeah. All right. Let me hit
Which
play.
is
Let me
more
hit play.
effective? Us traveling in my car or you trying to lay hands on these sick kids and heal them?
Yeah.
All day long, my Prius. Because we can go to every children's hospital in the nation in my car. And if it breaks down, we can keep on going and still get to the next destination. If his powers fail him at the first hospital we go to, and the next one, and the next one, and once we've gone through 30 of them, we can extrapolate that his powers will never kick in and work on the remainder of those
We can
children's
extrapolate. They
hospitals.
would never show up at the hospital.
They
All
would
right. Let me hit.
never.
Let me. Let me hit play.
Hmm.
I know some folks is going to start pulling out all the post hoc rationalizations that apologists has been polishing up for the past 2,000 years. But let me just point out that God showing up in real life to spend time with us is the outcome that would be most consistent with the gospel. If Jesus had never ascended into heaven at the end of the Gospels and the beginning of the book of Acts, ain't no Christian would find that surprising or confusing. No believer would go up to an immortal, resurrected Jesus who was still here and start explaining to him that it was
So they
all
need that. So when I get that feeling, I want sexual healing.
Or scriptural healing, depending on how that.
Sexual healing probably has way better positive health benefits than scriptural healing. Hey, look, we might not be able to take care of that cancer, but we're gonna make you forget about that cancer just for a hot minute.
wrong for him to still be here on account of all the post hoc rationalizations that apologists use
The
to try
fake
and account
healers
for the
are
fact that he
here.
ain't. There's no outcome that's more consistent with the gospel or even as consistent with the gospel as Jesus continuing to abide here on earth with his beloved disciples who he just got done dying for so that he could be with them forever. So that's the outcome we ought to expect if the gospel was true. Now, of course, under the myth hypothesis, there ain't no resurrected Savior to hang around and show up in real life. So we'd expect folks to need somebody to give them reasons to keep on believing the myth in the absence of their Messiah. And that's apologists. So the existence of apologists is consistent with the myth
Nothing but
hypothesis right out the gate.
feelings.
We don't need no post hoc rationalizations to explain why it take
None.
human effort to maintain the myth in God's absence. Human effort is exactly what we would expect given the myth hypothesis being correct. And once again, our real world.
The CGI thing is funny, y'all, because a lot of people, I think, are still, look, if it's you lack confidence thing, I get it. If it's a creative thing, I get it. Like, I think some of these animated channels are cool. It's a big thing in content spaces. A lot of channels are that way. But I always wonder how much of it is, particularly in these spaces, people don't want to be identified as atheists in their real life, and they find ways to make content without revealing who they are. Again, like I said, I'm well aware people do this in all types of content spaces: political content, gaming content, content that really content that's not in any way, shape, or form controversial. But I always wonder if the prevalence of this in these spaces is so high because of people just still not wanting to be associated publicly with atheism. I can tell you,
they don't want to be persecuted.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, they're a real risk. Yeah, they're a real risk. I've dealt with some of the real consequences, so I get it. It's a serious situation.
Observations is more consistent with the myth hypothesis than with
What
the
up,
gospel
Dave?
hypothesis. But we can take it even further than that. What kind of arguments is apologists going to be able to use if the myth hypothesis is correct? Well, if God's just a myth, then apologists ain't going to be able to use any arguments that require the existence of a real God before you can make the argument. The only arguments apologists is going to be able to make is arguments you can make whether there's any God there or not. And what kind of arguments do apologists make? Dr. Craig just got done showing us the 4 apologetic arguments that he thinks is the best arguments he can make in favor of God's existence. And in every case, his argument boils down to, here's something in the real world that's hard for folks to understand, and therefore my God did it. Well, human understanding's limited.
Oh, interesting. So Sue said, I think it's more just the VTuber thing is popular right now. Like I was saying, yeah, totally. And then Ember said, that's what that is. Like if you're a virtual tuber, like if you're not on yourself, if you use like a character thing. And then Ember said, I've been watching Mr. Bear for years, and part of it's safety, and we can all relate. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. There's a lot of people that I think that's the case.
And there's always going to be things in the universe that's hard for folks to understand. So he's always going to have material
I get it, Sue. It's still annoying.
Credit for. God don't need to actually exist in order for apologists to give him credit for stuff that folks don't understand. So Dr. Craig's 4 best arguments for God is arguments that don't actually require any God's existence. And that's exactly consistent with the outcome we'd expect if God was just a myth.
Now, I will say real quick, that is a good one. The idea that you can turn apologist arguments back on themselves because those are the type of arguments that would be used if in fact there was no God. Like that one's pretty slick, right? And apologist is Cajun for liar, and that's why it has to be that way, because they're arguing for something that doesn't exist. And there is no honest way to argue for something that isn't true.
Apologists can come up with post hoc rationalizations for why they can't.
Yeah, the AI is getting out of control. It's way worse.
But the myth hypothesis is already consistent with reality without the need for any post hoc rationalizations. So once again, the evidence that's there is more consistent with the myth hypothesis than with the gospel hypothesis. And I was just getting warmed up here. There's tons more I could say about why we'd expect a myth to emphasize faith and subjective personal experience over testable and verifiable claims. and why we'd expect to see doctrinal divisions and conflicting theologies, and why believers would be so tempted to try and mingle religion and politics. And I expect I'll get to more of that material as I continue making videos,
All good
because it's all
arguments.
good stuff.
Yeah.
But right now, we're supposed to be doing a series covering Dr. Craig's book, and so far we ain't got past the first 2 paragraphs of chapter 7, so I was feeling a bit guilty. Let's get on back to the book. As I said earlier, if a non-believer tells an apologist that there ain't no evidence for God, the apologist is going to start salivating, because that's just the kind of response they was hoping for. Quote, when the unbeliever says there's no evidence that God exists, you can stop him dead in his tracks by saying, gosh, I can think of at least 4 good arguments that show that God exists. And at that point, he's going to say, like what? And you're off and running.
Dade said Christians don't understand concepts such as post hoc and rationalization.
And there you go. Apologists loves to hear unbelievers say that there ain't no evidence, because that's just an open invitation for them to start blabbing about all their favorite arguments.
Can I say
But
something
he's
real
wrong
quick?
about one.
So
Yeah.
the word, variation of the word rational pops up. A question I don't think I've ever asked a believer. Are people of other faiths rational in their belief? Are their belief systems rational belief systems? And if they say yes, well, what is the difference between their approach, if they're irrational, what is the difference between their approach and the people who believe in your faith? Is it just the gods? Is that the only thing that has changed? The names that are put in the holy books and the stories that are put in the holy books? If that's the only difference, and you have no more evidence, your evidence would be the same kind of evidence, right? It's in our treasured holy texts. But if I'm saying I don't think Ganesh is real because it's like an elephant and part human god, no. But you're telling me that Yahweh is real, and you can't offer me anything more than they're offering for Ganesh. Oh, and loads of images of what Ganesh looks like, by the way. Ancient ones, even.
Exactly.
So,
all right, let me go ahead and hit this. Try to get through the rest of this.
The believer don't necessarily have to say, like what? If the apologist says, I have 4 arguments for God, the unbeliever can say, yeah, but arguments ain't the same as evidence. Anybody can make an argument whether their claim is true or not, but evidence can only be there if their claim is actually true. And I think that the conversation from there would deviate quite a bit from the script that Dr. Craig is recommending to believers. Naturally, I can't resist pointing out that this is yet another case of the myth hypothesis being more consistent with the facts than the gospel hypothesis is. If God's just a myth, you'd expect apologists to have arguments instead of verifiable evidence, and you'd also expect apologists to try and make arguments look like evidence. And that's exactly what we're seeing right here. Dr. Craig is acting exactly the way we'd expect him to if God's a myth.
So good.
Dr. Craig continues, quote, you'll find non-believers are often so
gang, I just want apologists to be the reason people leave Christianity. I just want them to realize this entire industry based on people who have to defend a non-existent God is the best evidence of said God's non-existence. It's fucking amazing.
To discuss these issues that all they can do in response to the arguments is just repeat themselves. That's no evidence that God exists. End quote. And sadly enough, this is a pervasive attitude among believers in general and apologists in particular. The apologist will present an argument, instead of verifiable evidence, and the non-believer will point out the fallacies and other flaws in the argument, and the apologist will just ignore the substance of the objections and just insist that the non-believer is simply denying the evidence, even though it's just an argument and not actual evidence. And I don't think I need to mention the fact that we'd expect apologists to refuse to address the flaws in their arguments if the myth hypothesis is true. So I won't mention that. Dr. Craig goes on, quote, "They've been taught to repeat, 'There's no evidence for God's existence,' like a mantra, apparently believing that saying it again and again somehow makes it true. It's really a cover for intellectual laziness and a lack of engagement. It's just a way of saying, 'I'm not convinced by your arguments.'" End quote. And notice how he's being careful here to associate not being convinced with intellectual laziness and lack of engagement. He's the one refusing to address the actual objections to his arguments and dismissing them as being just an empty, mindless mantra, and yet somehow it's the non-believer who's being intellectually lazy by not being convinced. Not to mention the irony of an apologist in a book of scripts for believers to use on unbelievers, accusing unbelievers of mindlessly repeating talking points that somebody's taught them. You
Presets
get
on the
the
radio,
impression that
ladies and
maybe
gentlemen.
Dr. Craig is venting just a little bit of his
He
own personal
sets
frustration
on the
here.
radio.
It must really suck to devote your entire career to convincing folks of stuff you ain't got any actual evidence for, and then have them not be convinced by your arguments.
And you know what? And this is another thing that has to just, again, I don't know why. I just feel like I'm having so much more clarity in my life about these things lately, and I don't understand why other people aren't there. There's an entire exploitation class, apologists, preachers, pastors. You know, I come from generations of pastors, y'all. Generations of pastors. My family has been pastoring since the motherfucking plantation, y'all. Okay? They're con artists. I don't know what to tell you. It's a scam. Like I would tell my grandfather that to his face. It's why I don't talk to his ass. It's why I have no interest in visiting him. Do I feel sad? Like yeah, my grandparents are gonna die, and it's gonna be like I didn't visit them. I don't have shit to say to them. That's what happens when your grandparents are cult leaders. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what I would say. Like, what do you want me to do about it? Like, this is a result of the choices they've made in life. Like, so to me, like, I'm just saying, if I'm willing to go there with my own family, y'all, we need to just end this thing. Like, that's what we should be telling people. We should be telling people, you're in a cult. I'm sorry. Well, my pastor's a good man. Your pastor's a con artist. And your pastor needs you to keep going to church, believing this foolishness, giving up 10% of your income so that he could keep rolling up to church in a new Cadillac with a fancy 3-piece suit on, while they had to come pick you up in the church van because you can't even afford your damn bus pass.
Mm-mm.
You ain't even got the extra public transportation fare on the weekends, but you gonna come here and get that pastor 10% of your money. I'm just saying, y'all, at some point we have to step up and accept the moral obligation to end this foolishness and understand that the Christians and the believers are not going to help us. All right, let me see if I can get through a few more minutes of this. Go ahead. Yeah, please. Yeah, go ahead.
One of the reasons, I'll focus on Christianity. If the Bible is taught in school, one of the reasons it's going to accelerate the end of Christianity is because the kids will be actually required to read it. And when they're a modern kid, right? When they find stuff they don't like, they're going to read it again. They're going to be more intentional in their reading, and they're going to start to discuss it outside a classroom with their peers. And those teachers are going to have to say, you know what? I didn't expect all these hard questions. And the teacher not knowing is not going to be good enough for those kids. It's not going to be good enough for those kids. When they are saying, okay, this says that, it's wrong in that for somebody to be gay and we're supposed to kill them. Why? Well, and that's just going to be pushed. right? It's
Yeah.
going to be pushed.
Yeah.
It's my dad cheated on my mom, or my mom cheated on my dad. The Bible says we're supposed to stone her to death. Well, that's not covered in the course material. Yeah, but it's in the book. Can we talk about it? And the teachers aren't going to want to do it. Oh, it was a different time. Then what use is this right now?
Right.
Right? The first
Right.
grader is going to
Right.
present you no
Right.
challenge. The fourth
Right.
grader will.
No,
Well, hold
yeah,
on.
I'm with the
It is
comparative
the
religion thing. Yeah, I'm always
so
with that.
my one of my brothers, sometimes when he brings up political things, I know they're motivated by his faith. And he talked about he's a multimillionaire. He talked about paying property taxes, and he goes, "I wish my money that I pay in property taxes for education, for the educational systems, could go for vouchers." And I knew what he meant, so people could use them for Christian schools. And
Yeah.
sometimes I am so bowled over that he brings this stuff up that I forget to sort of take the common sense approach with him, the common sense approach to objecting what he's saying. Hey, we don't give out vouchers for toll roads. There are plenty of freeways that are supported with your tax dollars that you spend on gasoline
Yeah.
and vehicle taxes, right? But we don't give you a voucher to go on the toll roads, which are privately owned. You don't get a voucher to go over bridges that are privately owned. You have to pay extra for that. So, if he brings it up again, I'm going to try to put that to him. Like, you do realize he doesn't have kids. He never had kids. But I would want him to realize, yeah, I guess that's a really good point. And
Also,
he pointed out, go ahead.
he should want to pay more in taxes so there's more money going into the public schools, so there's no need for voucher programs. Voucher programs are supposed to
Well,
be a solution to failing public schools, and the public schools are failing because the schools are underfunded. And they're underfunded because rich people don't want to pay property taxes. And schools are funded based on the property taxes. Just saying.
yeah, yeah.
Just saying.
That's something that's highlighted here in Fort Wayne big time. As we've been looking for houses, that's something people constantly bring up to me because now my daughter, she's that age. She's 14 months, but they tell me, like, you got to think about this before you buy a home. Which school districts are you going to be in? And I can see the jump in home pricing, um, because of the school system. There's some outstanding schools here. And if you want your kid to go to one, they're not bussed in from across town like it was when I was a kid. I don't think it's that way anymore. You got to be sort of in the neighborhood, if you will. So that's something that could add quite a bit of value to a home. And I think my daughter's going to be okay either way, whether she goes to just a regular public school or one of these exceptional ones around here. But it will be interesting to see what we end up doing. I don't know, but yeah, you make a good point of what vouchers are supposed to be for. But I think he would rather, because he's such a devout believer, he would rather see a kid go to a religious school
Oh
than
yeah.
one that is a secular school.
Because again,
Yeah.
like the priority is indoctrination. And this is why I hate to say this, but I think it's easy to focus on big bads or whatever, predator pastors, mega church millionaires and all of this type of stuff. But this is the ordinary everyday stuff. Like just that desire of a parent to be so devout and then want to send their child to a religious school. It's so sad. I mean, it's like you just want to lie to your kid. Like, when I reflect on my career, where I'm at, and the you know starting teaching at a Catholic university versus where I'm at now as like a community college versus my next step was just a public university. Like, I just tell people, like, I hated it. I hated teaching at a religious school because I hated it. Like even though I could do what I was there to teach science and I could do that, even knowing that gave me some sort of feeling of subversion or whatever. It was just terrible. It was terrible to work at an institution that was prioritizing indoctrinating students. It was terrible to work at an institution that you have to sneak teach. You have to work against the school to actually teach your students because they're just so fucking focused on brainwashing. And that's what religion is like brainwashed people emotionally dependent on everybody around them being as brainwashed as they are. And even when you try to coexist with it, if you're honest with yourself, it's just so unbearable. It's so overwhelming because it's so all encompassing for them. You know, it's like,
Well,
excuse me, the willies.
let me just address that. So something for you to keep in mind. Those religious schools are designed to be echo chambers where people of faith are safe. That faith is supposed to be protected and reinforced in that environment. I know that makes your job harder because you have to teach facts.
Yeah, exactly.
but but that's what it's
But
for.
that's
That
also not, but that's
environment is
not
for that.
education, right? That is, again, that is a priority that is not teaching the children accurately the way the world around them works. And to me, the we have to care more about the negative consequences of indoctrinating children than the positive comfort benefit to delusional religious parents. Matter of fact, this is going to start a whole different conversation because maybe I don't even think religious schools should be a thing that operates in the United States. But let me get out of here because I've got a 2 o'clock with
Okay.
Uncle Bobby. All right, gang. My one back friend, you want to give us your closing thoughts?
I will say this. Don't be afraid to have these conversations with your interlocutors about if they're, I would say this, I don't know. If someone is trying to convert me, oh, it's on. Let's do it. If someone says my point of view as a non-believer, a hard ER non-believer is is wrong, I'm ready for the challenge. Bring it on. But if this person is just trying to get through the day and they're saying a prayer over their breakfast at the local cafe, I got nothing to say to them about, what they believe. Same thing on an airplane. If they're not trying to share their faith with me, and it's not that big a deal to me. However, I'm probably going to start going to local like city council meetings and stuff like that, and I'll definitely discourage the teaching of the Bible in schools, and I'll explain why. I'm like, it's your my kid is probably going to be an atheist because I am an atheist, and she watches me like a hawk to do things like I do. And when I start reading her books, she's going to know the difference between truth and fiction, and she may even eventually learn to write excellent fiction herself. And if she discovers that early, she becomes a good storyteller early in life. She's going to know what she sees when she reads the Bible. That there's some pretty good stories in there, and
Yeah,
she's not going to think it's true.
I say let it happen. Let them teach the Bible in the school, and let the atheist kids laugh at the Christians kids like Sumami would. Gang, I say burn it all down after you
What's your
after
mommy?
you after you burn it all down, burn the ashes to make sure you got it all. All right, love y'all.
Hmm.
Thanks to the mods, thanks to everybody in chat. Be good to yourselves.
And each other.
Come check out the Blackout